He turned his back when she needed him most. But the birth of their children revealed a truth he could no longer ignore. If you enjoy stories like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We post daily. Continuing. The December sun poured through the windows of the penthouse on the Upper East Side, its golden rays dancing among the plants Marina had spread across the entire balcony. Raphael Sterling Albright watched his wife of 2 years paint a watercolor in the corner of the living room, her brown hair tied in a messy bun, some rebellious strands framing her concentrated face. She had this unique ability to transform any space into a sanctuary of beauty and life. Even that apartment, which was once just a cold demonstration of status and success, had become a home under her delicate touch. Raphael was known in New York City as one of the country's most respected entrepreneurs in agribusiness and solar energy. At 35, heir to the traditional Sterling Albright family, which for 3 generations had dominated the commodities sector in upstate New York, he had expanded the business into the renewable energy market, becoming a pioneer in the United States. His company, Albright Solar Innovations, had revolutionized the American market, installing solar farms on rural properties nationwide. Business magazines described him as a visionary, an elegant and calculating man, capable of closing multi-million-dollar contracts with the same coolness with which he chose his Italian suits. But Marina had discovered another Raphael, the man who woke up on Sundays to make breakfast in bed, who stopped the car on the highway to photograph a sunset she considered special, who had learned to distinguish shades of blue in her paintings simply because it was important to her. The art teacher from Denver, Colorado, had entered his life like an unexpected whirlwind 3 years ago, during an exhibition at an art gallery in downtown New York City. Raphael was there merely out of social obligation, accompanying international clients at another event for NYC high society. He circulated among the artworks with his usual polite smile, feigning interest in something he considered merely expensive decor. That's when he stopped before a canvas that made him completely forget where he was. It was a painting of sunflower fields under a stormy sky, but there was something in the way the artist had captured the light that transported him to the farms of his childhood upstate, to the afternoons he spent running among the crops on his grandfather's property. "Do you know upstate New York?" A soft voice pulled him from his trance. Raphael turned and found himself facing a young woman with green eyes, wearing a simple black dress and flat shoes, completely out of place in the environment full of designer brands and ostentatious jewelry. "I was born there," he replied, and for the first time in years his answer was completely honest without the corporate veneer he usually wore. "I grew up on a farm in Colorado near Colorado Springs. When I painted this, I was missing the fields of my childhood." Marina smiled, and Raphael felt something stir in his chest, a sensation he had forgotten existed. They talked for 2 hours, completely forgetting the other guests. She told him about her simple life in Denver, where she taught art to children at a public school and painted in her free time. He spoke about his businesses, but also about the constant pressure of carrying a surname that weighed like armor. When the night ended, Raphael knew that something had irreversibly changed in his life. Their courtship was intense from the start. Raphael traveled to Denver whenever he could, staying in discreet hotels to avoid attracting media attention. Marina introduced him to her real life, lunches at her parents' house, a modest 2-story house in the Highlands Ranch neighborhood, where her father worked as an accountant at a construction company and her mother was a retired nurse. Mrs. Lucy received Raphael with typical Colorado hospitality, but Raphael noticed the cautious look in her eyes when she thought he wasn't watching. "She's just worried," Marina had explained during one of their strolls through the Denver market hall. She's seen many stories of girls who fall in love with men from different worlds and end up getting hurt. But Raphael was determined to prove his intentions were serious. He began to learn about art, visited the exhibitions Marina recommended, even tried painting a few times, disastrous results that she lovingly kept in a folder. 6 months later, when he proposed to Marina on the balcony of her apartment in Denver, with a ring he had personally chosen, and a simple proposal without flashes or ostentation, Mrs. Lucy cried with emotion. The wedding was a celebration that blended their 2 worlds. The The ceremony took place at the Sterling Albright family farm in upstate New York, but Marina insisted it be an intimate event, with only family and close friends. She wore a simple lace dress that had belonged to her grandmother and carried a bouquet of sunflowers picked from the farm itself. Raphael had never felt as happy as he did at that moment when he said, "I do," under the starry upstate sky, with crickets chirping and the smell of damp earth in the air. The first 2 years of marriage were like a dream. Marina moved to New York City, maintaining a studio in the apartment where she continued painting and giving private lessons. Raphael discovered he liked coming home and finding her covered in paint, the apartment filled with the smell of watercolor and turpentine. He learned to value the small things, lazy weekend breakfasts, walks in Central Park, simple dinners she prepared while he talked about his workday. Marina also adapted to his world, but always maintaining her essence. She accompanied Raphael to social events when necessary, but preferred nights at home when he arrived from the office and she was waiting with a genuine smile and stories about her students or some new painting technique she had discovered. Raphael felt he had found in Marina not just a wife, but a companion who made him want to be a better version of himself. They often talked about children. Raphael always said he wanted a girl just like Marina, artistic and sensitive, while she joked that she hoped for a boy with his father's determination, but more relaxed. They had even started looking for larger houses, with a yard and space for Marina's own studio, dreaming of a family that was just waiting for the right moment to begin. It was on a March afternoon, when the summer rains offered a truce and New York City breathed more easily, that Marina decided it was time to take the test. She had noticed the signs for a few weeks: the delay, the morning sickness she attributed to stronger coffee, the exaggerated sensitivity to smells. When the 2 lines appeared on the pregnancy test, she felt a mix of euphoria and nervousness that left her trembling. But there was something else. During the first doctor's appointment, the ultrasound revealed a surprise neither she nor Raphael had imagined. It wasn't just one baby, it was 3, triplets. The doctor explained that it was a rare occurrence, especially without fertility treatment, and that the pregnancy would require special care and rigorous monitoring. Marina left the office in a state of shock. 3 babies. She tried to imagine what it would be like, how they would manage, but at the same time felt immense happiness taking over her chest. Raphael would be ecstatic. They always joked that they wanted a big family, and now fate was delivering 3 gifts all at once. She planned everything, carefully. She prepared his favorite dinner, lit candles, put on soft music. When Raphael arrived from the office, she was waiting in the living room, with the envelope containing the ultrasound and tests hidden behind her back. "You look different today," Raphael commented, kissing her face and noticing the special sparkle in her eyes. "I have a surprise for you," Marina said, her heart beating so fast she was sure he could hear it. "Sit here with me." Raphael sat beside her on the sofa, with the curious smile she loved so much. Marina took a deep breath and handed him the envelope. "Open it," she whispered. Raphael carefully opened the envelope and took out the papers. For a few seconds, his eyes scanned the black and white ultrasound images without fully understanding what he was seeing. Then, when the information finally processed in his brain, Marina saw something she had never seen on her husband's face: pure panic. Raphael's face instantly paled. His hands began to tremble imperceptibly as he stared fixedly at the images. Marina expected tears of joy, a shout of euphoria, maybe even for him to pick her up and spin her around the room. But what she saw was fear, a deep, primitive fear that seemed to drain all color from his eyes. "Raph?" she called softly, touching his hand. "Are you okay?" He looked up at her, and Marina felt a chill in her stomach. It was as if the man she knew had disappeared, and in his place was a haunted stranger. "Triplets," he said, his voice hoarse and strange. "Yes," Marina smiled, trying to infect him with her joy. "Isn't it incredible? 3 babies, Raph. Our family is growing more than we imagined." But Raphael didn't smile back. He abruptly stood up from the sofa, still holding the papers, and began pacing the living room like a caged animal. 3 babies, he repeated, more to himself than to her. 3? Marina stood up too, confused and beginning to feel scared. "Raf, what's happening? I thought you'd be happy." "Happy?" Raphael stopped pacing and faced her. There was something wild in his eyes that she had never seen before. "Marina, you don't understand. This is too dangerous." "Dangerous?" "Raf, the babies are fine. The doctor said it would be a pregnancy that needs care, but—" "No!" Raphael interrupted, his voice louder than he intended. "You don't know. You don't know about my family, about the things that happen." Marina approached him, trying to understand. "What things? What are you talking about?" But Raphael was already backing away, physically and emotionally. He placed the ultrasound papers on the coffee table and ran his hands through his hair, disheveling it completely. I need to think. I need to process this." And then he did something that broke Marina's heart. He grabbed his car keys and headed for the door as if fleeing from something terrible. "Raf, where are you going? We can talk about this." He stopped with his hand on the doorknob without turning to look at her. "I just need some time to understand all of this." And he left, leaving Marina alone in the carefully prepared dining room, with the candles still lit and the smell of hope beginning to turn into something more bitter. She looked at the ultrasound papers scattered on the table and felt the first tears stream down her face. 3 tiny dots in the black and white images that should have represented pure joy but had somehow become a source of terror. For the man she loved. That night, Raphael didn't come home. Marina stayed awake late waiting to hear the sound of the key in the door, the familiar noise of his footsteps in the hallway. But he didn't come. For the first time since they were married, she slept alone, hugging his pillow, trying to understand what had happened and how 3 small miracles had turned into something that made the man of her life flee, as if his life depended on it. The days that followed passed like a painful fog for Marina. Raphael returned home the next day, but it was as if a ghost had taken the place of the husband she knew. He avoided looking directly at her, spoke only the bare essentials, left early for work, and returned when she was already asleep. The apartment that was once full of life and conversations had become a silent mausoleum where 2 people lived like polite strangers. Marina tried to address the subject several times. She prepared special dinners, waited for him to come home from work, tried to start conversations about the pregnancy, or anything that could break the ice that had formed between them. But Raphael had become a master of evasiveness. He changed the subject, made excuses to distance himself, or simply pretended to be too busy with his phone or laptop to notice her attempts at closeness. "Raf, we need to talk about the babies," she tried one morning, as he hastily drank coffee before leaving for another day at the office. "Not now, Marina. I have an important meeting in 15 minutes, he replied, without looking up from his phone. "You always have an important meeting," she retorted, frustration finally showing in her voice. "You've barely spoken to me for 2 weeks. Raphael finally looked at her, but only for a second, and Marina saw something that scared her. There was guilt in his eyes, but also a steely determination to maintain distance. "I'm just very busy. The company is expanding to the south, you know how it is." But Marina knew it was a lie. She knew Raphael well enough to realize when he was using work as an excuse to escape something. And for the first time in 2 years of marriage, she felt completely alone. The situation became even more difficult when Marina began to feel the first, more intense symptoms of pregnancy. Morning sickness intensified, and she found herself rushing to the bathroom several times during the day. Her doctor had explained that multiple pregnancies tended to have more pronounced symptoms and recommended that she start taking more care with her diet and rest. On an especially difficult afternoon, when Marina was lying on the sofa after a morning of constant nausea, Raphael arrived home from work and found her pale and exhausted. "Are you okay?" he asked, and for a moment Marina saw a flicker of the loving husband she knew. "It's just the pregnancy," she replied, hoping he would sit beside her, ask about the babies, show some concern or affection. "The doctor said it's normal in triplet pregnancies." But the instant she mentioned the babies, Raphael closed himself off again. The flicker of care disappeared from his eyes, replaced by that contained panic she had learned to recognize. "You should rest more," he said coldly, heading to the bedroom. "I'm going to take a shower." And once again, Marina found herself alone, her hand unconsciously moving to her still small belly, where 3 tiny lives were growing, oblivious to the drama their existence had created in their parents' lives. The situation reached its limit during a corporate dinner for Raphael's company at the elegant Four Seasons restaurant in downtown New York City. Marina had dressed carefully, choosing a dress that disguised her still small but already noticeable belly, hoping the evening could be an opportunity for them to reconnect. She knew how important these occasions were for Raphael, and she had always been his companion at such events, conversing naturally with clients and partners. The evening started well. Marina talked with the wife of a Japanese investor about Brazilian art, helped Raphael entertain a group of German businessmen interested in solar energy, and for a few moments, she almost managed to forget the tension that had dominated their home for weeks. It was during dessert that everything fell apart. Marina was sitting next to Raphael, talking with Isabel Carter, the wife of the company's senior partner, about her experience as a mother of twins. "It must be an immense joy to discover you're having 3 babies at once," Isabel commented, smiling warmly. "Robert and I always say our twins were the greatest blessing of our lives. And you, Raphael, how are you handling the news of becoming a father of triplets?" Marina looked at her husband, expecting to see him smile, talk about the excitement of becoming a father, share the joy she hoped he felt. Instead, Raphael simply continued cutting his dessert, as if he hadn't heard the question. "Raph?" Marina nudged him gently. "Sorry, I was thinking about a company matter," he replied mechanically, without looking at either woman. Isabel looked confused from Raphael to Marina, clearly noticing something strange in his reaction. Marina felt her face flush with shame and embarrassment. "The babies are fine," she said, trying to fill the uncomfortable silence. "It's still early, but we're very happy." But Raphael did not confirm her words. He continued eating in silence, oblivious to the fact that his lack of reaction had made the situation extremely uncomfortable. Isabel murmured something about going to greet other guests and moved away, leaving Marina alone with the husband, who had publicly ignored her in what should have been one of the happiest moments of their lives. The drive home was in absolute silence. Marina looked out the car window, the lights of New York City spreading like a golden sea around them, while Raphael drove, with his eyes fixed on the road. The tension inside the car was almost palpable, and Marina felt that something was about to explode. When they arrived at the apartment, Marina could no longer maintain her composure. As soon as the door closed behind them, she turned to Raphael, tears already streaming down her face. "What is happening to you?" she cried, her voice echoing through the silent room. "How could you humiliate me like that in front of everyone?" Raphael stopped in the middle of the room, keys still in hand, and for the first time in weeks, looked directly into her eyes. "Don't lie to me," Marina interrupted, sobbing. "For weeks you've been acting like I have some contagious disease, like these babies are some kind of curse. I don't understand what happened to you." Raphael dropped the keys onto the side table, the metallic clatter echoing in the silent room. He ran his hands over his face, and Marina saw that they were trembling. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low and harsh. "You can't understand." "Then explain it to me," Marina cried, her patience finally exhausted. "Explain to me what changed between discovering I'm pregnant and you becoming a stranger. Explain why the man who said he wanted to start a family with me is acting as if our family is the most terrible thing in the world." Raphael turned to her, and Marina saw that his eyes were red, filled with an anguish she had never seen before. "Because it's terrible," he whispered. "Because you could die." The words fell between them like a bomb. Marina blinked several times, trying to process what she had just heard. "What did you say?" Raphael began to pace the room, his hands visibly trembling. "Now, my mother died in childbirth, my grandmother died in childbirth, my great-grandmother died in childbirth. All of them, Marina. All the women in our family who had children died giving birth." Marina looked at him as if seeing a ghost. "Raph, my father always told me," Raphael continued, his voice taking on a hysterical tone. He said our family is cursed, that every sterling Albright man is condemned to lose the woman he loves when she tries to bear him children. And now you're pregnant with 3 babies, Marina. 3! He stopped before her, holding her shoulders with hands that trembled uncontrollably. I can't lose you, he whispered, tears finally streaming down his face. I can't go through this. I'd rather distance myself. I'd rather you hate me than watch you die because of me. Marina looked at the man she loved and saw that he was completely broken by a fear he had been carrying alone for weeks. She raised her hands and touched his face, trying to convey all the strength and love she felt. Raphael, she said softly, this isn't a curse. They are tragic coincidences, but it's not. It's not? Raphael pulled away from her, laughing bitterly. 3 generations, Marina. 3 women dead in childbirth. How can that be a coincidence? Because medicine has evolved, Marina tried to argue. The things that killed women 50, 100 years ago are perfectly treatable nowadays. My doctor explained all the risks to me, and she said, your doctor doesn't know my family. Raphael interrupted her. She doesn't know about the curse we carry. Marina saw that she was losing Raphael to an irrational and desperate fear. She tried to approach him again, but he recoiled. I already lost my mother because of this, he said, his voice now cold and distant again. I won't lose you too. You didn't lose your mother because of you, Marina said firmly. You were a baby, Raphael, a baby. How can you blame yourself for something that happened when you didn't even know you existed? But Raphael had already closed himself off again, that cold armor returning to cover his feelings. I can't do this, he said, heading to the bedroom. I can't pretend everything is fine when I know what's going to happen. That night, for the first time since they were married, they slept in separate rooms. Marina lay in the empty bed, one hand on her belly where 3 small lives were growing, and cried until she had no more tears. She finally understood what was happening, but understanding did not lessen the pain. The man she loved was so dominated by fear that he had chosen to distance himself from her precisely when she needed him most. The following days were even more difficult. Raphael barely spoke to her, left early and returned late, and when they were in the same room, he avoided any mention of the pregnancy. Marina felt as if she was living with a hostile stranger, and the loneliness began to affect not only her emotional state, but also her physical health. She lost her appetite, had difficulty sleeping, and during a routine checkup, her doctor noticed that she had lost weight. Multiple pregnancies are stressful for the body, Dr. Paula Miller explained, examining the test results. But losing weight at this stage is not normal. Are you eating properly? Getting enough rest? Marina avoided talking about the situation at home, but the doctor was experienced enough to notice signs of emotional stress. Marina, I know that discovering a triplet pregnancy can be frightening, especially for the father. Many men become anxious about the responsibility. Are you doing couples therapy or talking to anyone about this? We're adjusting, Marina lied, not wanting to expose her marriage problems to a stranger, even if it was her doctor. Well, if you need referrals for professionals or support groups for parents of multiples, I can recommend some, Dr. Paula said gently. The important thing now is to maintain your physical and mental health. These babies depend on you being well. When Marina arrived home, she found Raphael in the living room, working on his laptop as usual. She sat beside him, determined to try one more time. The doctor said I need to reduce stress, she said calmly. That it's not good for the babies if I stay like this. Raphael didn't even look up from the computer screen. Then you should rest more. It's not that kind of stress, Raphael, Marina said, her voice growing firmer. It's the stress of living with a husband who acts like I'm invisible. It's the stress of carrying 3 children alone while their father pretends they don't exist. Finally, Raphael closed his laptop and looked at her, but his eyes still held that distant coldness that had become familiar in recent weeks. Perhaps it's better if you go to Denver for a while, he said, each word landing like a dagger in Marina's heart. Stay with your mother until the babies are born. She can take better care of you than I can. Marina stared at him, incredulous. Are you sending me away? I'm not sending you away. I'm suggesting that perhaps it's better for you. Better for you, you mean? Marina interrupted, standing abruptly. Better for you not to have to look at me and remember your fears. Better for you to be able to pretend this pregnancy isn't happening. Raphael also stood up, and Marina saw that he was struggling with something internally. Perhaps it's better for all of us, he said finally. And it was at that moment that Marina knew she had lost her husband to a ghost of the past. The man standing before her was no longer Raphael, but a prisoner of his family's fears, unable to fight for their love. "All right," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. "If that's what you want, I'll go." Raphael seemed surprised by the ease of her. Surrender. But Marina had already made a decision. If he wanted her to leave, she would, but she wouldn't return until he decided to fight for their children and the marriage they had built together. The next morning, while Raphael was at the office, Marina packed her bags. She put away her clothes, her painting supplies, some precious wedding mementos, and left a simple letter on his bed. "When you decide we are more important than your fears, you know where to find me." The trip to Denver was one of the most difficult of her life. As the bus cut through the roads of Colorado, Marina looked out the window and wondered how everything had collapsed so quickly. A few weeks ago, she was a happy married woman, expecting 3 children from the man she loved. Now she was fleeing to her parents' house, feeling rejected and abandoned precisely when she most needed support. But one thing she knew for sure. No matter how much Raphael was haunted by his family's ghosts, she would fight for the children she carried. And if he couldn't overcome his fears to be part of that fight, she would face everything alone. Because those 3 small beings growing inside her deserved a strong mother, and she would be exactly that for them. Marina's first days in Denver were enveloped in a mix of relief and melancholy. Her parents' house in the Highlands Ranch neighborhood welcomed her with the familiar warmth she had forgotten, but at the same time every room, every corner, held memories of her adolescence, of a time when her dreams were simple and life seemed much more predictable. Mrs. Lucy didn't ask immediate questions. With the wisdom of someone who had raised 3 daughters and worked for years as a nurse, she simply opened her arms to Marina and said, "Your bed is just as you left it, dear. Rest as much as you need." But her father, John Sterling, a direct and practical man, couldn't hide his concern when he saw his daughter arrive with 2 large suitcases and eyes swollen from crying. "Where's that son-in-law of mine?" he asked during dinner on the first day, carving the roast beef Mrs. Lucy had prepared, especially to celebrate his daughter's return. "Raphael is in New York City, Dad. He's very busy with the company," Marina replied, avoiding the worried glances. Her parents exchanged across the table, but it was impossible to hide the truth for long. In the days that followed, when Raphael didn't call even once, when Marina spent hours in her room crying softly, when she refused to talk about the babies with the enthusiasm a future mother of triplets should show, Mrs. Lucy knew something was very wrong. "Marina," she said one afternoon, as the 2 were organizing baby clothes that neighbors had started donating when they heard about the multiple pregnancy, "do you want to tell me what's really happening?" And then, finally, Marina told everything. She spoke about Raphael's irrational fear, about the supposed family curse, about weeks of coldness and rejection, about the humiliation at the company dinner. Mrs. Lucy listened in silence, holding her daughter's hand as tears streamed down Marina's face. "My daughter," Mrs. Lucy said when Marina finished speaking, "I always knew that family had old wounds. The first time I met Mrs. Eleanor, Raphael's grandmother, I realized she carried a very deep sadness." Marina looked up, surprised. "You met his grandmother? At your wedding, remember? We talked a little about the family history. She told me about the daughter-in-law she lost in childbirth, about how her son was devastated and raised that grandson in fear." Mrs. Lucy sighed deeply, but I also noticed something she might not have realized she was sharing. "What?" "The dates, dear. She mentioned the dates of the deaths, and I, as a nurse, paid attention. Raphael's mother died in 1987, and his grandmother in the 1950s. At that time, the complications that killed women in childbirth were very different from what we face today. There was no ultrasound, no neonatal ICU, no emergency C-section as a safe option. Marina listened with growing attention as her Mother continued. And there's one more thing. Mrs. Eleanor mentioned that Raphael's brother, who died at 5 years old, was born before him. If there really was a curse, why did that child survive childbirth if the mother died giving birth to Raphael? Her mother's words planted a seed of doubt in Marina's mind. What if there really was no curse at all? What if it was just a succession of tragedies that had been superstitiously interpreted by a family already shaken by grief? Meanwhile, in New York City, Raphael was living his own torments. The apartment that was once a sanctuary of love and life had become a silent mausoleum. He came home from work and found Marina's paintbrushes still scattered on the studio table, her art books marked on the pages she was studying, her coffee mug still in the sink, as if she could return at any moment. He tried to throw himself into work with more intensity than ever, approving new projects, traveling for technical visits, working late into the night to avoid returning home. But nothing could silence the voice in his head screaming that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. During a trip to Miami, where the company was installing a new solar farm, Raphael received a phone call that would change everything. It was Eleanor, his 82-year-old grandmother, who still lived on the family property upstate. "Raphael, I urgently need to speak with you." His grandmother's voice sounded firm over the phone despite her age. "It's about Marina and the babies." "Grandma, I don't want to talk about that right now." "You will want to hear what I have to say," Eleanor interrupted him with the authority only a family matriarch could have. "Come visit me as soon as you get back from Miami, and come prepared to hear some truths you should have heard a long time ago." 2 days later, Raphael drove to the family farm, located between Syracuse and Rochester, where he had spent many childhood weekends. The 500-acre property still produced soybeans and corn, but a considerable portion had been converted into a solar farm, one of Albright Solar Innovations' first experiences with renewable energy on rural properties. Eleanor was waiting for him on the porch of the main house, an early 20th century construction that had been carefully preserved by the family. At 82, she was still an imposing woman, her completely white hair tied in an elegant bun, blue eyes that had lost none of the intelligence and determination that made her manage the property after her husband's death. "Sit here, my grandson," she said, pointing to the rocking chair beside hers. "We need to talk about the ghosts you're carrying." Raphael sat down, but kept his gaze fixed on the crops that stretched to the horizon. "Grandma, if you're going to try to convince me to go back to Marina, I'm going to try to convince you to stop being a coward," Eleanor interrupted. Her voice cutting like a blade. "Just like your father was, just like your grandfather was. You men of this family have a lamentable tradition of using past tragedies as an excuse to flee from love." Raphael finally looked at her, surprised by the harshness of her words. "Your mother didn't die because of a curse, Raphael," Eleanor continued. "She died because she had placenta previa, a complication that nowadays is detected early in pregnancy and treated with scheduled C-sections. Your father knew this, the doctors explained it to him, but it was easier for his grief to believe in a curse than to accept that it was simply bad luck. But you always said—" "I never said there was a curse," Eleanor corrected him firmly. "I said our family had gone through tragedies. Those are different things. Your great-grandmother died in 1952 from puerperal fever, because at that time there were no adequate antibiotics to treat postpartum infections. Your mother died from an obstetric complication that is routinely treated today. Where is the curse in that?" Raphael got up from the chair, starting to pace the porch as he did when he was nervous. "But it's 3 generations, Grandma. 3 women who died giving birth." "And how many generations of women in our family survived childbirth?" Eleanor asked. "Your Aunt Carmen had 4 children and is alive and well. Your cousin Letitia had twins 5 years ago. Your other cousin, Gabriella, just had her 3rd child." His grandmother's words fell upon Raphael like rays of light, piercing a curtain of darkness. For the first time, he was hearing medical facts instead of superstitious fears. "Do you want to know what the real curse of this family is?" Eleanor continued, her voice growing softer, but no less incisive. "It's the cowardice of the men. Your grandfather emotionally distanced himself from me after your mother died. afraid that I might die too if I became pregnant again. We spent 10 years living like strangers in the same house. Your father did the same thing after your mother's death, raised you in terror instead of love, filled your head with fears instead of courage." Raphael stopped pacing and looked at his grandmother, seeing tears in her eyes for the first time since he was a child. "And now you are doing exactly the same thing," she said, "abandoning the woman you love precisely when she needs you most, letting fear steal the joy of having children, perpetuating a tradition of cowardice that needs to stop with you." "But what if Marina dies?" Raphael asked, his voice coming out as a desperate whisper. "What if I can't protect her?" Eleanor got up from her chair and went to him, holding his face between her wrinkled but firm hands. "Raphael, my dear grandson," she said, looking directly into his eyes, "the only thing you can guarantee is that if you continue on this path, you will lose Marina anyway, and you will lose your children too, not to death but to fear." That night, Raphael slept in his childhood bedroom on the farm, staring at a ceiling he had seen thousands of times as a child, but now with a completely different perspective. For the first time in months, he could think clearly. Eleanor was right. He had allowed irrational fears to destroy what was most precious in his life. The next morning, Eleanor took him to what had been his grandfather's office, where the family's old documents were kept. Among yellowed papers and old photographs, she pulled an envelope from a drawer that Raphael had never seen before. "This is a letter your mother wrote to you shortly before she died," Eleanor said, handing him the envelope. "She asked me to give it to you when you became a father." With trembling hands, Raphael opened the envelope and took out some sheets of thin paper, handwritten in the delicate script he could still vaguely remember. "My dearest son," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means it's time for you to start your own family. I wanted you to know that, even knowing the risks, even knowing I might not survive to see you grow up. I chose to have you because I believed that love is worth any risk." Raphael had to stop reading for a moment, tears blurring the words. "If someday you are afraid to love completely, if someday you allow the fear of loss to prevent you from living fully, know that my death is not your fault. You were the greatest joy of my life, however brief. Do not let fear steal your life as it is about to steal mine. Live with courage, my son. Love without reservations. And if you have children, teach them that true love requires courage, not cowardice." When Raphael finished reading, he was crying like he hadn't cried since childhood. All the guilt he had carried for years, all the fear that had built his identity, crumbled at once. His mother had not died because of him. She had chosen to love him knowing the risks, and had left a message for him to make the same choice. "Now you understand," Eleanor said softly, "why I kept this letter for so many years. I was waiting for you to mature enough to understand its message," Raphael carefully put. The letter back in the envelope and looked at his grandmother. "I need to go to Denver," he said. "I need to get my family." "You do," Eleanor agreed, smiling for the first time. "But don't think it will be easy, my grandson. You hurt that girl deeply. You'll need to prove that you've truly changed." That same afternoon, Raphael cancelled all his appointments for the week and hit the road for Denver. During the 6-hour drive, he had time to reflect on everything he had lost, on how he had allowed fear to control his life, on how he had abandoned Marina precisely when she needed him most. When he arrived at Marina's parents' house, on the quiet street in the Highlands Ranch neighborhood, it was already night. The lights were on, and he could see through the living room window Marina sitting on the sofa, one hand on her visibly larger belly, painting on a small canvas resting on her lap. She was more beautiful than he remembered, despite her slightly swollen eyes that suggested sleepless nights. The pregnancy had given her a special glow, and Raphael felt a pang of pain realizing he had missed weeks of this precious moment in their lives. He took a deep breath, gathered all the courage he could find, and rang the doorbell. Mrs. Lucy opened the door and looked at him with a mixture of surprise and distrust. "Raphael," she said, with little emotion in her voice, "I wasn't expecting you." "I know, Mrs. Lucy," he replied respectfully. "I know I don't have the right to show up here like this, after everything that happened, but I need to talk to Marina. I need to tell her some things I discovered, and I need to ask for forgiveness for what I did." Mrs. Lucy studied him for a few seconds, her experienced nurse's eyes searching for signs of sincerity in his face. "She's been suffering for weeks," she said finally, her voice low but firm. "If you came here to hurt her more, you'd better leave now." "I didn't come to hurt her," Raphael said, and there was a new sincerity in his voice that Mrs. Lucy recognized. "I came to fight for her, for our family, and if she doesn't want to forgive me, I'll accept it. But I need to try." Mrs. Lucy hesitated for a few more seconds, then opened the door completely. "She's in the living room," she said. "But Raphael, if you make her cry again, I will personally throw you out of this house. Understood?" "Understood perfectly, Mrs. Lucy," Raphael replied, and entered the house where he might reconquer the woman he loved. Marina looked up from her canvas when she heard footsteps in the living room, expecting to see her mother returning from the kitchen with the chamomile tea she had promised to prepare. Instead, she saw Raphael standing in the doorway, with an expression she had never seen before. It wasn't the distant coldness of the past few weeks in New York City, nor the desperate panic of the night he discovered about the triplets. It was something different, vulnerability mixed with determination. "Hi," he said simply, his voice hoarse with emotion. Marina dropped the paintbrush she was holding, and the small blue paint stain spread across the canvas she was painting, a garden with 3 small trees sprouting side by side. "What are you doing here?" she asked, and Raphael could hear years of pain condensed in those few words. "I came to get my family," he replied, taking a hesitant step into the living room. "If you'll let me." Marina watched him as he approached slowly, as if he were approaching a wounded animal that might flee at any sudden movement. And perhaps that was exactly what she was at that moment. "May I sit?" he asked, pointing to the armchair next to the sofa where she was. Marina nodded briefly, without taking her eyes off him. 7 weeks had passed since she left New York City, 7 weeks during which she had cried, questioned herself, grown stronger, and learned to imagine a future without him. Seeing Raphael there, alive and real instead of the painful memory she had been trying to overcome, stirred things within her that she had tried to bury. "How did you know where to find me?" she asked, placing her hands protectively over her belly, which was now quite evident under the loose dress she was wearing. "I knew you'd come here," Raphael replied, carefully sitting in the armchair. "It's where you always feel safe, and I don't blame you for wanting to feel safe away from me." Silence stretched between them for a few moments. Marina studied the face of the man who had been her husband, looking for signs of what had brought him there. He looked different, thinner, with deep, dark circles that suggested sleepless nights, but there was something in his eyes that wasn't there before, a clarity she hadn't seen for months. "Raphael," she said finally, her voice carefully controlled, "if you came here to ask me to come back without anything having changed, you can leave now. I'm not going to spend the last months of pregnancy being ignored and rejected again." "I know," he said quickly, "and you have every right to hate me for what I did. But I need to tell you some things I discovered, things about my family, about the fears that dominated me, about lies I believed my whole life." Marina raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Raphael interpreted the silence as permission to continue. "There is no curse, Marina," he said, his voice gaining strength. "There never was. I talked to my grandmother. I saw medical documents. I read letters my mother left. The women in my family who died in childbirth died from specific medical complications that are perfectly treatable nowadays." He took the yellowed envelope that Eleanor had kept for so many years from his pocket. "My mother wrote this for me before she died," he said, offering the letter to Marina. "She knew the risks, but she chose to have me anyway. And she left a message saying that love is worth any risk." Marina took the letter with hesitant hands and read it in silence while Raphael watched every change of expression on her face. When she finished, there were tears in her eyes, but also something that could be the beginning of forgiveness. "Why didn't you discover this before?" she asked, returning the letter to him. "Why did you have to hurt me so much before seeking the truth?" Raphael bowed his head, shame evident in every line of his body. "Because it was easier to believe in fear than to face it," he admitted. "Because I was raised hearing that the men in our family are condemned to lose those they love. And when you got pregnant, especially with triplets, panic completely overwhelmed me." "And you thought abandoning me emotionally would protect me somehow?" Marina asked, her voice growing harsher. "You thought making me feel rejected and invisible would somehow ensure I wouldn't die in childbirth?" "I know it doesn't make sense," Raphael said, looking up to meet her eyes. "I know it was selfish, cruel, and cowardly. I wasn't thinking of protecting you, Marina. I was thinking of protecting myself from the possibility of losing you." The brutal honesty of his confession caught Marina off guard. She had expected excuses, justifications, perhaps even attempts to minimize what he had done. But she didn't expect this raw admission that he had been selfish. "And now?" she asked. "What's changed? How can I be sure you won't panic again at the first complication?" Raphael leaned forward, his hands almost touching her knees. "Because now I know the truth," he said. "Because I talked to my grandmother, to doctors. I read about the conditions that killed the women in my family. Because I understood that the real danger doesn't come from imaginary curses, but from ignoring the real medical care that you and the babies need." He paused for a moment, as if gathering courage for the next part. "And because I finally understood that, even if there were some real risk, abandoning you wouldn't diminish it. It would only ensure that if something happened, you would face it alone." Marina felt something stir in her chest, a mixture of hope and caution. His words sounded sincere, but she had suffered too much in recent weeks to accept easy promises. "Raphael," she said slowly, "even if I believe you've changed, even if I decide to give you another chance, things can't go back to how they were before. I can't pretend the last few months didn't happen." "I don't expect that," he replied quickly. "I know I broke your trust. I know I'll have to win it back, and I don't expect it to be easy or quick." At that moment, Mrs. Lucy appeared at the living room door, carrying a tray with 3 cups of tea. "I thought you might want something warm," she said diplomatically, placing the tray on the coffee table. "Thank you, Mom," Marina said, accepting one of the cups. The simple gesture gave her a few seconds to collect her thoughts. Raphael accepted his cup with a silent thank you, realizing that Mrs. Lucy was, in her own way, giving him a chance. "Mrs. Lucy," he said, as Marina's mother prepared to leave the room, "I wanted to apologize to you too. I know I hurt your daughter, and I know that hurt you as well." Mrs. Lucy studied him for a moment, and Raphael remembered why he had always respected that woman. There was a quiet strength in her that came from years of caring for people, of seeing through falsehoods and recognizing genuine sincerity. "Raphael," she said finally, "I saw my daughter cry every night since she arrived here. I saw her question if she was good enough, if the babies were unwanted, if she had done something wrong. If you are here just to hurt her again, you'd better leave now." "I'm not," Raphael said, meeting her eyes firmly. "I'm here to fight for my family, for our family, and if Marina gives me the chance, I will prove that I've changed." Mrs. Lucy nodded briefly and left the room, leaving the two alone again. "Marina," Raphael said after her mother's footsteps disappeared down the hallway, "I know I don't have the right to ask this, but I wanted you to come back to New York City with me." Marina almost choked on her tea. "Come back? Just like that?" "Not just like that," Raphael hastened to clarify. "I know you have every right to send me away from here, but the babies will be born in a few weeks, and in New York City, you have access to the best doctors, the best hospitals, and I want to be there for everything." "You want to be there," Marina repeated, her voice tinged with skepticism. "Last time I tried to include you in the pregnancy, you ignored me in public." Raphael closed his eyes for a moment, the memory of that night at the restaurant hitting him like a punch. "I know," he said softly, "and I will carry the shame of that for the rest of my life. But Marina, if you give me a chance, I swear I will be by your side at every appointment, every exam, every moment you need me." Marina placed the cup back on the tray and stood up, walking to the window that overlooked her parents' small garden. The pregnancy had changed her body in ways she was still getting used to, and she moved with the new care of someone carrying a precious load. "If I come back," she said without turning around, "it won't be as your obedient wife, who accepts everything in silence. It will be as the mother of your children who will demand respect and total honesty." "I understand," Raphael said, standing up as well. "And if you abandon me emotionally again, if you run away at the first difficulty, I will leave forever," she continued, finally turning to face him. "There will be no third chance." "There will be no need for a third chance," Raphael replied. And there was a new conviction in his voice that Marina recognized as sincere. They looked at each other for a long moment, two people who had loved, deeply hurt each other, and were now trying to find a way back. "All right," Marina said finally, "I'll come back. But with conditions. Any condition you want. First, therapy. For you, for me, for both of us together. If we're going to try to rebuild this, we're going to do it right." Raphael nodded immediately. "Done. Second, total transparency. No secrets, no hidden fears, no running away when things get tough." "Agreed." "Third, I want a house. Not that apartment where everything reminds me of the last few months. I want a place of our own where we can start." "Hover." Raphael smiled for the first time since he arrived. "I was already thinking about that. I found some options with a yard and space for a large studio for you." Marina felt a pang of hope. Maybe he really had changed. The return to New York City happened a week later, time Marina needed to properly say goodbye to her parents and resolve some pending issues. Her father had a private conversation with Raphael that no one else heard, but which left her son-in-law visibly more serious and determined. The house Raphael had found was in Greenwich, Connecticut, a spacious two-story house with a large garden and a separate room that would be perfect for Marina's studio. It wasn't ostentatious like the old apartment, but it had something the penthouse never had, a feeling of home. "It's perfect," Marina said when they saw the house for the first time together. She was almost 30 weeks pregnant, and her large belly made her move with special care. Raphael watched her exploring the rooms, imagining where she would place the baby's cribs, which room would be transformed into a studio, how she would organize things for 3 small children. There was a light in her eyes that he had almost forgotten, and he felt immense gratitude for having fought to have this second chance. The days that followed were of careful rebuilding. They moved into the new house, bought furniture together, set up the baby's room with 3 cribs side by side. Marina resumed giving art lessons, now with a small group of private students who came to her house. Raphael fulfilled his promise of total transparency, talking about work, about his fears, about the individual therapy process he had begun. Couples therapy also helped a lot. Dr. Charles Maxwell was an experienced psychologist who did not allow them to minimize the damage caused by months of estrangement, but also helped them build tools to deal with future conflicts in a healthier way. "Fear is a normal emotion," Dr. Maxwell explained during one of the sessions. "The problem isn't feeling fear. It's allowing fear to make decisions for you without questioning." Marina was 34 weeks pregnant when they had their first big scare. During a quiet afternoon, when she was painting in the studio while Raphael worked from home in the improvised office, she felt a sudden and intense pain in her lower abdomen. "Raphael!" she cried, and he rushed to the studio to find her bent over the table, breathing with difficulty. "What's happening?" he asked, immediately by her side, but without the panic he would have shown months ago. "I don't know. It was a very strong pain," Marina replied, trying to straighten up. Without hesitation, Raphael grabbed the car keys and the bag they had prepared for emergencies. "Let's go to the hospital," he said calmly. "It's probably nothing serious, but it's better to be sure." At the hospital, they discovered that Marina had developed gestational diabetes, a common complication in multiple pregnancies, but one that required careful monitoring. Dr. Paula Miller explained that they would need to adjust Marina's diet and monitor the babies more closely. "It's a serious condition, but perfectly manageable," the doctor explained. "The important thing is that you're here early enough for us to start the proper treatment." Raphael held Marina's hand throughout the consultation, asking questions, taking notes, demonstrating the involvement that had been so lacking at the beginning of the pregnancy. "We'll get through this together," he whispered in her ear as they left the hospital. "I'll be with you, every step of the way." And he was. In the following weeks, Raphael accompanied Marina to all additional appointments, helped monitor her blood glucose, learned about the special diet she needed to follow. When she felt overwhelmed or worried, he was there to remind her that she wasn't alone. They were finally functioning as a real couple, facing the challenges of the high-risk pregnancy together, when the scare came that would change everything. It was a Saturday morning. Marina was 37 weeks pregnant, and they had just finished breakfast together in the garden of their new home. Marina stood up to get more orange juice from the kitchen when she felt something wet run down her legs. "Raphael," she called, her voice sounding strange. "I think my water broke." Raphael was by her side in seconds, seeing the clear liquid on the kitchen floor. "It's okay," he said, and Marina could see that he was struggling to stay calm, but succeeding. "It's 37 weeks. The babies are big enough. Let's go to the hospital." But when they arrived at the emergency room, they discovered that the situation was more complicated than they imagined. Marina's blood pressure was dangerously high, and tests showed signs of preeclampsia, a condition that could be fatal for her and the babies if not treated immediately. "We'll need to deliver now," Dr. Paula said, her voice calm but urgent. "It's the only way to protect both Marina and the babies." And it was at that moment, when Marina was taken to the operating room for an emergency C-section, that Raphael faced his greatest test. All the fear that had dominated his life for months returned like a devastating wave. But this time, instead of fleeing, he held Marina's hand tightly and said, "I'll be here when you wake up. We'll be here." The corridor of Mount Sinai Hospital had never seemed so long to Raphael. He paced back and forth in front of the operating room door, his hands trembling imperceptibly as he tried to maintain his composure. Every minute that passed seemed like an eternity, and his mind fought against the family ghosts that threatened to take over his thoughts. But this time it was different. When fear tried to whisper the old superstitions, Raphael remembered the words of his grandmother Eleanor, his mother's letter, the conversation with the doctors who had explained the real causes of the deaths in his family. When anxiety threatened to overwhelm him, he focused on the promise he had made to Marina, to be present, to be strong, to face everything together with her. Dr. Paula had explained the procedure before Marina was taken to surgery. The preeclampsia was worsening rapidly, and the only effective treatment was immediate delivery. The triplets, even being born at 37 weeks, had excellent chances of survival and normal development. The C-section would be performed under general anesthesia due to the urgency of the case. "Marina is in good hands," Dr. Paula had assured, before entering the operating room. "Our team specializes in high-risk multiple births. We will take very good care of her and the babies." Raphael clung to those words like a shipwreck survivor clings to a piece of wood. Modern medicine, specialized team, favorable statistics. Facts, not fears. Science, not superstition. Eleanor had arrived from Syracuse as soon as Raphael called and was sitting in the waiting room with Mrs. Lucy, who had taken the first bus from Denver when she heard about the situation. The two women, from different generations and backgrounds, had united in common concern for the grandchildren, who were about to be born. "She's strong," Eleanor said when Raphael joined them for a few minutes. "Marina is a courageous woman, and these babies will be courageous too." "My girl has always been a fighter," Mrs. Lucy added, holding a rosary between her fingers. "Since she was little, when she wanted something, she went after it until she got it. She won't give up now." Raphael nodded, trying to absorb the strength that the baby's two grandmothers demonstrated. He had spent his entire life surrounded by the fear of death in childbirth, but there were two women who had given birth, who had faced the risks and survived, reminding him that life was always stronger than death. 2 hours passed until Dr. Paula finally appeared in the hallway, still dressed in surgical scrubs. Raphael jumped up, trying to read the expression on her face, looking for signs of good or bad news. "Raphael," she said, and her first smile was enough to make his legs almost give way with relief. "Congratulations. You have 3 beautiful and healthy children." "And Marina?" he asked immediately, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Marina is well. It was a complicated surgery. She lost more blood than we would have liked, but she is stable. She will need to stay hospitalized for a few days for monitoring, but there are no signs of serious complications. Raphael had to lean against the wall. Weeks of controlled fear, hours of anguish in the corridor, years of family terror, all collapsed at once in a relief so intense he could barely breathe. "The babies?" Eleanor asked, getting up to join them. "2 boys and a girl," Dr. Paula informed with pride. The first weighed 4 pounds and 13 ounces, the second 4 pounds and 10 ounces, and the little princess exactly 4 pounds. For 37-week triplets, these are excellent weights. They are in the neonatal ICU now, but it's just standard procedure for multiples. There are no serious complications. Mrs. Lucy began to cry with joy, and Eleanor hugged Raphael as he tried to process that he had become a father of 3 children in a single morning. "When can I see Marina?" he asked. "She's waking up from the anesthesia now. In about an hour you can visit her, and you can see the babies whenever you want through the neonatal ICU glass." Raphael followed Dr. Paula to the neonatal ICU floor as if in a dream. His children, 3 small human beings he had helped create, who had survived all the fears and superstitions that had almost destroyed his family. When they reached the large glass window overlooking the ICU, Raphael saw 3 small incubators side by side, each with a tiny baby connected to monitors, but breathing on their own, moving small fists and legs. "They're perfect," he whispered, tears streaming freely down his face for the first time in years. "This one is the firstborn," the nurse explained, pointing to the first incubator. "Born at 2:32 p.m. The second was born 2 minutes later, and the girl at 2:37 p.m. She insisted on being the last to arrive, typical princess behavior." Raphael laughed through his tears. 3 children, a family he had almost destroyed for fear of losing it. "Do they have names?" the nurse asked. "Daniel," Raphael said, looking at the first baby. "Gabriel," he continued, indicating the second. "And she is Sophia." These were names he and Marina had chosen together during therapy sessions, when they were rebuilding not only their marriage but also their dreams for the future. Names that meant strength, faith, and wisdom. When he finally got to see Marina, she was pale but awake, with a faint smile that lit up her entire face when he entered the room. "How are our babies?" were her first words. "Perfect," Raphael replied, carefully sitting on the edge of the bed and holding her hand. 3 small miracles who look a lot like their mother. "I want to see them," Marina said, trying to sit up. "Tomorrow," Raphael promised, kissing her forehead. "The doctor said you need to rest today. They're not going anywhere." Marina smiled and closed her eyes. "For a moment. I was so scared during the surgery. Before the anesthesia took effect, I kept thinking if you would be here when I woke up." "I promised I would be," Raphael said, raising her hand to his lips. "And I always will be. No matter what happens, Marina, I will never again let you face anything alone." In the following days, Raphael divided his time between Marina's room and the neonatal ICU, learning to be a father to 3 premature babies while taking care of his wife's recovery. Eleanor and Mrs. Lucy took turns helping, and the new house was quickly prepared to receive 3 babies. Marina recovered more quickly than the doctors expected, and a week after the birth, she was already walking through the hospital corridors, eager to hold her children in her arms. The babies also progressed well, gaining weight and strength every day. "They are warriors," Dr. Paula commented during one of the consultations, "their mother's heritage for sure." But Raphael knew that they had also inherited something from him, a determination that he had learned to transform from fear into strength, from flight into presence. When they finally brought the triplets home, 3 weeks later, Raphael felt as if his real life was beginning. The house in Greenwich came alive in a way he had never imagined. Simultaneous cries, alternating feeding times, diapers everywhere, but also heart-melting smiles, tiny hands clutching his fingers, moments of absolute peace when the 3 babies slept nestled together. Marina blossomed as a mother. She organized feeding schedules with the precision of a general, temporarily transformed the studio into a playroom, and still managed to find time to paint small watercolors depicting moments of their new life. Raphael also changed in ways he had not anticipated. The man, who used to work 12 hours a day, began leaving the office at 5 in the afternoon to help with the baby's baths. The executive, who traveled constantly on business, began to decline trips lasting more than 2 days. The man, who had been raised by nannies and governesses, made a point of actively participating in raising his children. "You've become a complete super dad," Marina laughed one night when she found him in the baby's room at 2 in the morning, rocking Sophia, who had woken up crying. "She couldn't sleep," Raphael explained, gently swaying his daughter. "I think she missed me." "Of course she did," Marina said, leaning against him and watching their daughter begin to relax in her father's arms. "She knows you're really here now." 6 months after the triplets' birth, Raphael made a decision that surprised even Marina. During a Sunday lunch at their new home, with the babies playing on the living room rug under the watchful eyes of their 2 grandmothers, he announced that he had created a foundation. "The Mary Eleanor Maternal Support Institute," he said, showing the documents he had prepared. "It will offer free medical and psychological support to women with high-risk pregnancies." "Raphael," Marina said, moved, "it's beautiful. But why Mary Eleanor?" "Mary was my mother's name," he explained. "Eleanor is my grandmother. The 2 women who taught me, each in her own way, that love is stronger than fear." The foundation started small with a clinic in a popular New York City neighborhood, but grew rapidly. Raphael discovered that he had found a greater purpose than just expanding the family business. He was transforming his old fear into a force to help other families. "It's incredible," Dr. Paula commented during the inauguration of the foundation's second clinic. "You took a story of near-family tragedy and turned it into something that will save other families." Marina, who had resumed giving art lessons and now also offered art therapy for anxious, expectant mothers at the foundation, smiled upon hearing the comment. "He was always like that," she said, watching Raphael talk with a group of triplet parents they had met through the clinic. "When he decides to fight for something, he fights with everything he has." 2 years later, on a Sunday morning when the triplets were playing in the garden of the house while their parents had coffee on the porch, Marina made an observation that made Raphael stop with his cup halfway to his mouth. "Just look at them," she said, pointing to Daniel, Gabriel, and Sophia, who were running after a golden retriever that Raphael had given them for their first birthday. 3 happy, healthy children, surrounded by love. Imagine if you had let fear win. Raphael followed her gaze and saw his children, golden hair shining in the morning sun, laughter filling the air, infinite energy that transformed the yard into a playground. Daniel was the natural leader, always inventing new games. Gabriel was the thoughtful one, who stopped to observe the flowers and birds. Sophia was the brave one, who climbed everything she saw and protected her brothers from any imaginary threat. "I can't imagine," he said, placing the cup on the table and pulling Marina onto his lap. "Because it didn't happen. Because you didn't let it." "I didn't do it alone," Marina protested. "You chose to fight." "I chose because you showed me what was worth fighting for," Raphael replied, kissing her neck. "And because I finally understood that true love requires courage, not cowardice." They stayed like that for a few minutes, embracing, on the porch watching their children play, absorbing the peace of a Sunday morning that could have been just an impossible dream if fear had won. "Mom! Dad!" Sophia shouted from the garden, running towards the porch with her siblings behind her. "Rex found a butterfly." The 3 adults went down to the garden, where a yellow butterfly had landed on the golden retriever's head, which remained completely still so as not to scare it. "It's beautiful," Daniel whispered, his 2-year-old eyes wide with admiration. "Why did it choose Rex?" Gabriel asked, always curious about the reasons behind things. "Because he stayed still," Sophia explained with the wisdom of a 2-year-old. "Beautiful things come when we stay still." Raphael and Marina exchanged a look over the children's heads. There was a profound truth in their small daughter's words. The most beautiful things in life really did come when one had the patience and courage to stay still long enough to receive them. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was finally silent, Raphael found Marina in her studio, painting a new canvas. It was a family portrait, 5 figures in a sunny garden, with 3 small children, playing while their parents watched, smiling. "It's to hang in the living room," she explained when she noticed he was watching, to always remind us of how we got here. Raphael approached from behind her, wrapping his arms around her and resting his chin on her shoulder to get a better view of the painting. "I don't need a painting to remember," he said softly. "I remember every day how I almost lost everything because of fear, and how you saved me from myself." Marina turned in his arms, her green eyes meeting his. "It wasn't me who saved you," she said, touching his face with fingers still stained with paint. "It was you who chose to save yourself. I just showed you it was worth trying." Raphael kissed her then, a kiss that contained 3 years of journey. The initial love, the pain of separation, the struggle of reconciliation, the joy of the family they had built together. A kiss that proved that true love was not the absence of fear, but the choice to love despite fear. Outside, New York City glowed with its millions of lights, and in the house in Greenwich, 3 children slept peacefully in their cribs, protected by the love of parents who had learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that there are things more important than fear. And on the living room wall, beside Marina's watercolors depicting sunflowers and golden fields, hung a portrait of the family that almost didn't exist, but now shone as proof that love, when faced with honesty and courage, can overcome any curse, any fear, any obstacle. The future stretched before them like a blank canvas, ready to be painted with new adventures, new challenges, new moments of joy. And Raphael and Marina knew with the certainty that comes only from those who have been through fire and emerged stronger, that they would face everything together, as a family, as partners, as 2 people who had chosen love instead of fear and discovered that this choice made all the difference in the world.